Hello everyone and welcome to this video where we are going to take a look at engine diagnostics. So if you've built a modular engine, maybe using my microcontroller, maybe not using my microcontroller, maybe your own version, doesn't matter. If you did all this and for some reason your engine doesn't start, it stalls out, whatever, we're going to see if I can't go through some of the common mistakes and issues that will prevent your engine from running smoothly. So here you have a standard engine that I've made. It's an 8-cylinder, 8 flat. You pretty much have your cylinders there. You have a clutch at the end. You got your manifold here that pretty much makes sure that your two series of cylinders are attached, is what it does. Otherwise you'd have to have an air manifold on each side, an exhaust on each side, fuel, whatever, all of the things. But if you have the manifold, it is good to rock. So that is the first thing. Make sure that when you actually make your modular engine here, that you're using manifold pieces to connect the two series of cylinders. Like I said, if you don't do that, you may end up with an issue where your engine is only using half of the banks, or maybe you have your fuel on one side and whatnot, and your air on one side, but without the manifolds, these two rows of the cylinders don't communicate with each other. So that is the number one thing. Now going into the actual workshop here, workbench, you can see what we have is the fuel tank attached, we got the radiator attached, we got a simple exhaust system with catalytic converter, again the clutch, and over here we got a motor and a generator. Now in this video, this is actually an old version, so another thing I always tell everybody is to make sure that you put a little breather valve on your gas tank. So it's as simple as putting a T-piece and then a gas relief valve or gas filter and then a fluid port end. So like this, that tank will not sort of stall itself out. It's not going to keep reducing the amount of pressure inside until it becomes pretty much a vacuum and it wants to suck the fuel back in. So you definitely want to have one of those. As far as the cooling system goes, one thing that I've made a common mistake on is missing the actual manifold, for example, or the pump, either or. So you have to have the manifold attached to the cylinder, and you have to have a pump that's going to circulate it through the radiator system. Another thing that I recommend doing is having here a constant number going to your clutch pressure, or going to your fluid pump for your radiator, and going to your alternator, for example. So you can have a constant number going to all three of those parts, or you could use your RPS from your cylinder and attach that to your fluid pump, attach that to your alternator, and even to your clutch pressure. The thing to keep in mind when putting it on your clutch pressure is your microcontroller may work a little differently. In the case of my microcontroller, if I do this, it actually doesn't work the way I intend. So I actually do recommend in my microcontroller putting a constant number with the one value. Now that's the actual physical engine build side of things. Of course, we have the microcontroller that I've developed, we have the modular engine generator, and we have the modular vehicle ECU and controls. They're similar, but also different. In this video, we're going to take a look at the modular engine generator, and maybe I make another video later on that also talks about the other one. But in this case, this microcontroller that I've made, we have to have a key button and a throttle button. Now the key button, of course, can start our fan, our radiator, but also it should go to the this one, generator start override. Now in that case, that just pretty much forces the thing to start, because if you go into the select, you see here there's actually a battery level which to start the generator, battery level to stop it, a throttle it uses, all that good stuff. So this is an automatic generator, meaning once the battery drops to a certain level, the engine will start. We can move on to the other nodes. So we have the air manifold throttle out. So we attach this, find our air manifold. And you see this is the fuel manifold and the air is right there. So we plug that one in. Next, we have the electric boost motor. So in this case, it's a little motor that I put next to or on the path of whatever is coming out of the actual RPS, and it's supposed to help power up your engine faster than just regular old starters. But also, if it seems to be dropping RPS, this motor will catch it and bring the RPS back up. So that's an easy one to plug in. The battery, like I said, that is what sets the thing off. So when we have our battery level set, that is what dictates when this thing starts, or the generator start overrides. That's how this modular or this microcontroller work. Then we have the manual throttle lever. We'll plug that into the manual throttle lever. Of course, there are different values. You don't want to have, if you're using my microcontroller, you don't want to have it go all the way down to 0. If you have it down to 0, it won't be running. It's going to start off on 0. If we do take a look inside here, actually, this may resolve some issues as well. So if the manual throttle is greater than whatever we've set it to, then this all works. So actually that wouldn't be the case, because as long as our throttle, which is 2, is set, even if this is 0, the throttle going into the microcontroller still should be 2, which is this guy here. Okay, then enable auto start if battery low. So this is a button that you press if the battery's low. Sorry, if the battery's low, the engine will start. You can also disable it to prevent the thing from turning on automatically. So when you go to the microcontroller, obviously it is an automatically starting microcontroller for the engines that uses these levels of the battery. But if you have this off, then you don't even need to do that. It's going to only be started by the key. Fuel manifold, we have this, engine RPS, and engine starter right there. Then we have this one that plugs into any one of the cylinders, and we're going to be getting some valuable data from the cylinders themselves. Now, everything's plugged into the electric, or to the battery, except for the generator. So we're going to plug that in. Now everything's plugged in. We have this, and we have these things here set. So everything seems to be ready to go in this instant. We'll take a look and throttle it up. Well, first let's start it on. Now that is way too long for that starter, but it's okay. It seems to be chugging along quite nicely, even though this is 0. That's because we've set the throttle on the generator microcontroller. And if we turn it up, it revs up, and you can see that it does not want to exceed that RPS that we've set the limit to. So as soon as it goes over 20, it kind of down throttles itself. So if you jump over into here, you can see that we have an RPS limiter. If I put it up to 30, for example, then we're going to get a much different experience. We're going to have the thing start up, and we're getting 30, and then it kind of turns itself off. So you can see it jumps between these two air-fuel ratios. Say you don't want this to be happening. Well, why is this happening? You have to explore. It's happening because the load on this engine, which is this generator, is way too little for the capacity of this engine. This engine is breezing right over this little generator, and it is not even worrying. So it's not at all being slowed down, in essence, by this generator, and it wants more. It wants to keep going. So if you have that type of engine problem where your RPSs are just bouncing off the roof and you're not doing anything, I'd say you got to check out what you're actually putting into your engine, or what you're outputting rather out of your engine. So whatever is coming out of your clutch into here is too weak or too small or not enough load for this engine. So let's try medium generator in this case, and you're going to see right away that we're going to get a much different reaction. Now, if nothing gets to this generator, that's a problem with this clutch. Now you could see that I went ahead and put it with the constant number of 1. So now we know the clutch is good, and that's not stopping it. So the generator is actually working, and it'll just come down to the load itself in that instant. We'll start this up with 0.2 on the throttle. We'll see what happens. It may actually stall out. Let's take a look at the RPS. Oh, they're climbing slowly, so something's happening. Obviously, if we throttle up, it seems to like this generator, meaning the RPSs are staying beneath that threshold of 30. Now 30 is the maximum cutoff I set in my microcontroller, because I find anything over 30 is just going to cause your engine to overheat way too quickly. So I've limited that, otherwise a lot of people are going to be saying your engines are overheating or whatever. So this seems to be a happy medium for this engine at 100% throttle. Obviously, we can throttle down, and it's going to find out and balance itself at a lower level, obviously less output. Hopefully it doesn't stall out. Now if it does get too low on the throttle, meaning if I put it down to here, so now it's just at 0.2, you could see that it's kind of jumping between this RPS, but it's because the small engine, or the small electric motor, is keeping this RPS up. And in this case, you're draining your battery. You're kind of, it looks like you're finding equilibrium. It's kind of jumping around 0.73 because whatever this thing is making is instantly being eaten or consumed or used up by this small electric motor. So in this case, you're just kind of, you're not stalling per se, but you're not really doing anything because it's too low. But once you put it like that, 50%, let's say, you could see that now our RPS is increasing and we're actually not using that electric motor. So this engine and this generator seems to be a balanced load. So that is how to properly make an engine work. Now how to improperly make it work, a lot of people end up putting way too much load on their engine. Okay? And I get comments and people saying like, oh, my engine doesn't want to start, or it's stalling out, it's not handling the load. Take a look at this. Even at 100% throttle, with this large generator, we seem to be fully utilizing the throttle on that electric motor. And the RPS is slowly increasing, but we're slowly also draining our battery. So this is overloaded. This is not going to do anything for your generator, for your car, whatever it is you're trying to do, because what's happening is this engine could just not keep up with this large generator. It's like, I mean, analogy would be like trying to pull a semi-truck trailer with a golf cart, a gas-powered golf cart. It would just stall out or not be able to do anything. So with this kind of flaw or kind of issue that you may be having, you should always try to revise what you're putting power into. Now, one thing that you will notice are the tires or the wheels. The different wheels, the 3x3 requires less energy than a 5x5, which requires less than a 7x7, and etc, etc. So it kind of goes up from there, but really what you have is the power. One of these wheels is not equal to the other. If we throw on this large wheel, that's different than if we throw on a small wheel, if that makes sense. So you do have to be careful when you're powering up your vehicles. Now obviously this one engine with this wheel sitting up on with no friction or whatever, it kind of spins around. But if you had 4 of these things compared to if you had 4 3x3s, the 3x3s would probably be more well suited for this engine than the 9x9. So you got to consider what load you're putting into your engine and how you're making that work. So we covered now the actual parts of the engine, how to make sure to get everything working properly. We covered some of this stuff. Again, if you throw on one of your engines and it's not working, say it stalls out, say it has any issue, my first plan of action would be to cut whatever is here and just see if the thing turns on. Because now you're not putting any load into the system, whatever it is you have here, whether it be wheels or generators. You just want to see if your engine runs. If your engine runs, that means you've connected the manifolds, right? That means you've put the right amount of air. That means you've put the right amount of gas with the little vent and potentially cooling system and exhaust and everything. You know, if you don't have an exhaust, it's going to stall out pretty quickly. No matter what, you just can't run an engine without an exhaust. It can't continue to build up inside it. So look at that. Yeah, it's working for now. And then what's going to happen is it's going to come to a point where obviously the exhaust is building up inside and it's just going to stall right out. It's not going to be able to do this forever. So like I said, either it is engine related, and by engine I mean the physical building of the engine, or it's microcontroller related. If you didn't connect something properly, I just opened up an old version and you see nothing is attached. So you have to make sure it's attached properly. If your engine works with no load, meaning the actual engine itself is done right and the microcontroller is connected successfully, then you can slowly start to add load and see what happens. Either you're going to rev up so high and max the RPMs, meaning you're putting too much throttle on, so you could actually turn down the ability of the engine, so you have your RPS limiter, but you also have throttle here, so you're probably throttling up too high if you have a very small load like a single generator, or you're maybe stalling it out or causing it to stop because you've overloaded it, or you find that perfect balance. So these are just some of the things I think about as I put together one of these engines and kind of see exactly what is coming out of it and getting it to work efficiently and effectively. So for a last trial, you see this whole setup. We're going to turn on this, and with that 0.2, it actually doesn't like it. It seems to be needing this electric motor. But if we put it to like 5 or 0.5, the electric motor is no longer doing anything. Now, there will be some kind of balancing act that you'll have to do. If you are using this microcontroller, the modular engine microcontroller, you can get away by setting a limit on your microcontroller here to be at 0.4, 0.5, or your actual throttle lever, you'd set your minimum to 0.5 and your start value to 0.5, and this would work. So in this case, you start up the engine, and it's already at 0.5 throttle, and it goes, and it has no problem. But if you, as you saw, if we turn it down, if we do 0.2 throttle, then it doesn't really work. We have to have our electric motor moving it and all that stuff. So balancing and making the engine generator microcontroller work is much easier. It gets more difficult when you have cars or airplanes, whatever, because then you have loading on your engine that you can't simply just turn up the throttle. You can, but you have to be very careful, because with a car, you're not putting constant power through it. Like in this case, the second this generator's on, it's at 0.5 throttle. With a car, say you have the wheels properly done and you need 0.5 throttle, like in this case, what happens when you stop? What happens when this clutch is reading 0? Well, what's going to happen is your engine's just going to shoot up to the RPMs and it's going to be jumping, redlining until you put load onto it. So there is a much more refined balancing act when it comes to vehicle motors and engines, but for this very crude constant throttle type of system, especially for generators, this is really all it takes. One other thing to mention is that if you do take a lever and put it, let's say here, and we do take a clutch and put it here, alternatively you also could adjust this clutch value. So rather than being a constant number, you could attach your lever to this, and then in that case you don't need the other clutch. You could just use the modular engine clutch, so you don't use the constant number anymore. And then we'll plug this thing into electricity, make sure it can go from, you see here, 1 to 0, all that good stuff. We'll turn the sensitivity down a little bit, and we'll go ahead and put the large generator now. So you can trick your system into using a larger generator or a larger load, even though your motor isn't really made for it, by making a clutch that's adjustable. So of course, when it's 0, this engine will start right up. But you'll see, once you start adding load, you can find a balance of what you can put into this system. So now you can see we're around 20 RPS with our modular clutch around 55% and 100% throttle out of this engine. So you can, I'd say, trick your system, or rather reduce the loading that goes to it, by using either a clutch with a limited kind of activation, or if you use gears. I'm not going to get into gears in this video, but we all know that Stormworks has the gears. So if you use a gearbox, you can change the power and the torques going through the system, and you could then, in essence, make this work more efficiently. Now, what I always tell everyone, because gearboxes and gears are a little tricky, is if you want to do gears, you just got to play around with them. So in this case, we'd put this medium generator, and I'd put a gear in here, face it in any arbitrary direction at first, slap on like 9 to 5, try it out, see what happens. Obviously you have to plug it into electricity. Then if you're not happy with the results, you go here and you just flip the thing around, and then you could see what the difference is. Then you can go and change the value, something bigger, even all the way 3 to 1, and you'll see. So you keep playing around with it until it gets a system that's satisfactory. So that is an alternative to the clutch, adjusting the clutch power. Alternatively, you could obviously do both. You could do gearbox and clutch adjustments and find that sweet spot. But again, for cars, the clutch is super important and gearboxes are super important. For just constantly powered generators, you'll find that you can get very similar amounts of electricity if you tune it properly off the get-go than if you start changing gears and clutch adjustments midway through. The clutch does serve a nice purpose if you do want to rev up your engine nice and strong, like how I just did here. If we go and try this engine, you can rev it up nice, and then you hit it with the clutch. So in that case, I think that clutch isn't plugged in, but the point is, oh, we have a gear going through it. But the point is, you can use that to your advantage. You can put it on a timer, you could put it on a button. There's all kinds of different stuff, but that's just the basics of making a modular generator or a simple engine setup with a load. So thank you all for watching. Stay tuned for more videos, stay tuned for more creations, content, and as always, happy Stormworksing everyone. See you in the next video.